วัสดีค่ะ IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde was recently in Bangkok. The IMF is opening an office on the Bank of Thailand's premises and plans to provide assistance to Myanmar and Laos. She discusses with Nation Group Editor-in-Chief Sutichai Yun on the state of the Eurozone, impacts on Thailand, and direction that ASEAN should take.
So is the worst over for Europe?
That's a difficult question because it would require being able to read into the future.
But for now?
But certainly at this point in time, the Europeans have done a lot. They have made progress, but there is still more work to be done. When I say that they have made progress, they have increased the firewall.
Yes.
That was back in March. The European Central Bank has played a much more significant role by providing liquidity and helping the interbank system to function a bit better. It has lowered the interest rate as well in order to stimulate investment and make sure that the monetary policy is properly transmitted throughout the region. And the European members, the sovereign states, have made progress in trying to improve the governance, improve the discipline amongst themselves, and put in place sanctions in case the discipline is not respected. But it is not enough, and more is expected in the future, which is something that they have already begun to accept. A couple of weeks ago, they had a European summit, as you know, where they agreed that there would be a road towards banking union, and in particular European banking supervision, that there would be direct participation in the capital of banks that need to be restructured, instead of via the sovereign.
This is direct.
Yeah, and so those are progresses, again, in the right direction, but it needs implementation, and it needs additional progress as well, because we believe that the European monetary union needs to be completed with European banking union as well as European fiscal union.
So is the patient out of the ICU room?
It's under, and will continue to be, in my view, under very, very attentive care.
You are in Asia.
Yes.
And you have talked to a few leaders in the region. Can Asia save the world from the European epidemic, whatever you call it?
I think Asia can actually teach a lot of what it learned when it went through its own crisis. And there are lessons that Asia can share with colleagues and partners, whether in Europe or in the United States or on a global basis. But what we observe at the IMF is that there is a lot of interconnection.
Yes.
There's a lot of interconnection, and what is vital for countries of Asia is to take advantage of these interconnections, but not be affected or infected by contamination. And that requires both fiscal and monetary policies that are likely to protect the economies of Asia.
But is the immunity enough for Asia?
There is no immunity.
No?
There is no immunity because all countries are connected. And whether it's through trade, exports, import, whether it's through financial links with international banks that are set up in multiple places and capital flows that move in and out of countries, whether it's through remittances from countries of employment and low-income countries, all of those are links that bring and keep the economies together. So there is no absolute immunity at that time of accelerated movement of capital, accelerated sharing of information, and very, very rapid transmission.
Well, Asia will be affected because our exports rely quite heavily on the European markets.
It's not going to be the same for all countries.
Yeah.
If you look at a country like China, for instance, it has very strong and high volume of connections with Europe and with the United States.
Yes.
And if the exports of China towards those two regions were to abate significantly, that would be, a major disruption in the growth model of China. And it would also affect, by sort of indirect effects, economies that work with China on a regional basis. But if you look at the trade structure of a country like Thailand, for instance, you have about only 10% of your exports to Europe. So it could affect it, but let's assume it's 10% of 10% in the case of a reduction. It's not an enormous blow. It's a reduction.
But if China is affected, we will be affected too, you see.
Yeah,
indirectly.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right, which is why in the various leaders that I have met on the occasion of this Asian trip, there was a concern clearly about the situation in the Eurozone, but there was also a concern about the slowing down or the potential slowing down of growth in China.
India?
India is probably a much stronger domestic market than it is connected to the rest of the world. It doesn't export as much. It doesn't rely as much on the outside.
But China has, in the past few weeks, cut its interest rates twice.
Yeah.
Does that indicate that China is preparing for a slowdown, you think? The European disease has caught up with China?
I think it's an indication that China is very attentive to keeping the growth movement. It's obviously in China's interest to keep its growth rate in the range of 8%. And it will certainly focus on the policy mix that will sustain that 8% growth. We've seen a lot of evolution with the Chinese economy. And it's clearly shifted the pattern of growth from being vastly export-led to being more balanced with export, yes, but also with investment, which was the traditional domestic growth of China, but also moving towards consumption. So it's a more balanced growth model with clear numerical results. When you look at the current account of China, pre-crisis, post-crisis, there is a vast difference and a rebalancing in the zone.
You're not concerned, like some observers, that China might face some bursting of bubble, especially in the property?
No, because
area?
if you look at the way in which they have addressed that risk, the prudential instruments that are being used are geared at avoiding the bursting of a bubble. And the real estate prices have gone up, but they have not gone up in a very massive and distorting way. So I think they're keeping that under very, very close watch. And no, I'm not overly concerned about that.
ASEAN as a whole, would it be seriously affected by the European problem? So you are saying that ASEAN should not follow the EU pattern of integration? You think that EU had made the mistakes ASEAN should learn from? Thailand's economy. I think IMF has also studied Thailand's current economy quite closely.
Right.
How do you see it? So you see a rebound, a very